Hi, my name is Chelsea Jarvis, Intuitive Money Mindset Coach, and I'm super excited to dive into this video for you. I don't want to waste a minute. I want to make this valuable for you. So let's just dive right in, right? I'm talking to you if you're an entrepreneur who has big dreams of money and success and all those things, but you're starting to feel a little bit delusional around the edges because no matter how hard you work or how much mindset work you do, even, you're not making the progress that you want. And the money's just not showing up for you the way that you know it should be, the way it's showing up for other people. If you find yourself constantly letting pushy clients step on your toes, or pushy team members for that matter, step on your toes, push boundaries, and basically make you kind of hate your business, but you're afraid to fire them because you need the money or you need the support, you're afraid you won't be able to replace them, blah, blah, blah. Or if you feel yourself really drained by your business and it's kind of actually, instead of enabling you to live the life you want, it's actually hindering you from living the life you want. It feels like anything but freedom. Or if you really want to raise your prices, like you know that you could be charging more, you see other people charging more, but even though you know it would make a huge difference in your life and allow you to work less, you get stuck and hung up and end up undercharging time after time. And you're not really sure how to get out of that cycle. So even though I've always been dreaming big my whole life, nothing changed until I started clearing my limiting beliefs. I took a crap ton of action, working like 10 hours a day, but it was never enough to make more than a couple $1,000s a month. That approach of taking action, relying on external stuff, that didn't work for me. And if it's not working for you, then in this video, you're going to learn why and how to change that. So let's start with talking about why your mindset work hasn't been producing results. Because chances are, if you're sitting here and you're drawn to mindset work, chances are you've already started doing it. Maybe you've been doing it for a month. Maybe you've been doing it for years. And you're not seeing the results that you want, which is why you're sitting here. So let's start by understanding what mindset work really is. This is an analogy that I've heard used by other people. I wish I could remember who I originally heard it from. I did not come up with this, but it's brilliant, so I'm going to share it. Imagine that your life as you see it, your financial situation, the home you live in, everything, all the details that are around you. Imagine that is a projection on a wall. Imagine that, there's the projector sitting in front of me right here, and it's shining a projection onto the wall. So on that wall, that projection is kind of all the external details of our life, all the people in our life, all the things, the financial stuff, the car you're driving, whether or not you're driving a car, all of that stuff. That's the projection on the wall. And our mind is the projector. Our mind is what's actually projecting the image onto the wall. So with this analogy, you know that if you wanted to change what's being projected onto the wall, you can't go and try to fix what's on the wall directly. The thing to do is go to the projector and change what's at the source. Change what's being projected. And that's what mindset work really is, in a nutshell. It's going to the source to change the thoughts from who you're being right now to who you need to be in order to realize your dreams. So here's what mindset work is not. It is not massive action. Yes, you will have to take action in order to achieve your dreams. Like there's always action to be taken because life is not meant to be lived in an armchair, people. So it's not massive action though. It's not like hustle and like work 12-hour days, even though you're exhausted and burnt out, but you have to do it because you feel like you have to. That's not what mindset work is. It's not external manifesting efforts and rituals and like these manifesting rituals that you see, crystal grids and things like that. It's not that there's anything inherently wrong with them. It's that they don't replace mindset work. They're kind of a Band-Aid, if you ask me, if you're not doing the mindset work to create a more permanent shift. It's also not digging like deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into your past until you feel completely buried under your past. And it's also not just like positive thinking and repeating meaningless mantras that don't really connect with you. None of those things are mindset work, and certainly not effective mindset work. So through doing all of those things, if your projector is still projecting something that's unwanted onto the wall because of the thoughts that you're thinking, whether you realize it or not, then no amount of crystal grids or massive action or positive thinking is going to do anything. So here's how most people tend to do mindset work. They either journal themselves to death, digging like deeper and deeper and deeper into a story and kind of constructing this massive narrative around why you're so blocked. And it gets to be so big that you don't even know what to do with it. You're just like, okay, like I have this massive story and I feel kind of crushed under it. It's so huge, but now what? Like, how do I even begin to shift this? And so then you end up just kind of feeling discouraged. Or maybe you do the opposite, which is noticing a negative thought and trying to like steel yourself against it and guard yourself against it, change your thoughts and trying not to acknowledge that it's there. And as a result, you become emotionally constipated, stuck, right? And what I'm saying, I'm not saying that you should entertain every negative thought that pops into your head, but sometimes shit comes up because it needs to be cleared. And if you're not clearing it, then you're just shoving it down and suppressing it. And that actually takes up a lot of your energy. It eats up a lot of your energy that you could be using to manifest what you want, right? So what do you do? What's the solution here? I just give you two extremes. One where you're exploring the story like to death and almost making it bigger than it needs to be. And then the other extreme where you're not acknowledging it at all. So what do? You have to give these emotions an outlet, a healthy outlet that acknowledges them and releases them with love so that you're not shoving them down, but you're also not drowning in them, right? So let's bring this back to money because that's why you're here, right? Your bank account is a product of your belief systems. It's your bank account is the projection on the wall, and your mind is the projector, right? Your mind is always, always, always the projector. So everyone has a collection of beliefs that they've picked up along their lifetime, stories they created, etc. So everything you're manifesting right now, money-wise, is a direct reflection of those beliefs. So in order to change those beliefs, are you gonna go scratch at the wall and try to change the projection there? No, of course not. You would go to the projector and change the film. So here's what I'm gonna show you. I'm going to click over to my slide deck and I'm gonna show you the hierarchy of 3 steps that you can use to start shifting these beliefs so that they are more in alignment with what you actually want to believe. So let's do that. All right, so let's take a look at the paradigm shift hierarchy. Isn't it pretty? All right, so before you see just a regular triangle with 3 sections, no big deal, nothing special about it like that. But let's start with the bottom tier. So in the bottom tier, we have release. Now, essentially what release means is whatever negative emotion or negative belief you have, and it only feels negative it's only a negative belief because it feels negative, right? So if it feels negative, then we need to release the emotional charge from around that belief. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to change the belief in this step. In fact, you're probably not going to, especially if it's a strong one. But what you want to do is you want to ask yourself, on a scale of 1 to 10, how strong is this belief? Does this belief feel right now? Does it feel like a 10, like, yes, this is absolute fact? Or does it feel like 0? No, that doesn't feel true at all. It rings completely false. Now, chances are when you start off with these beliefs, you're probably going to be minimum of 5. Maybe some of them will even get up to 9 or 10. And the goal here is to use some tools that I really prefer myself. One of them, I'll get into the tools in a minute actually. You want to use the tools in order to release the emotional charge so that it feels almost hollow. So that instead of being having a lot of emotional charge and bringing up anxiety and fear and doubt and all of those icky emotions, it feels kind of empty. It's almost like the words have lost their meaning. You know what I mean? You know, when you say a word enough times and it no longer has any charge for you, that's kind of what we're going for here. You know, when you use these tools that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes, it can go from feeling like a 10, like solid truth and oh my gosh, this feels so scary, blah, 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 to, it's not that big of a deal actually. Like it doesn't feel like it's not that you've shifted the belief, it's just that it no longer feels like it has such a strong hold on you anymore. So you want to release it until you get down to, on a scale of 1 to 10, until you get down to like a 2 or less, ideally. This is the biggest tier physically on the hierarchy. And that's not a coincidence. This is where you're going to be spending the most time. This, you might spend 5 minutes on it. You might spend hours. But releasing is the most important part here. You have to start here. So after release is reset. Reset is the next step. And what that means, it means going back inside of you, looking to yourself, finding your inner peace again. And this is kind of like hitting the reset button on your mind. Because what we're doing here through this process is we're basically rewiring your brain. So we want to hit the reset button. And I've got some tools to talk about in just a minute for that as well. But after you've released a lot of the emotional charge and kind of gotten all that ickiness out of your system, then you go within and you reset. And then the third one is reframe. Now reframe, this is where we actually shift the belief. This is where we reach for a new perspective. This is where you actually rewire the part of your brain that was holding on to this belief. Because you know how sometimes you see things, you've heard a quote like 1,000,000 times on Instagram or in books or whatever, and it never really stuck with you. But then at one point in time, for whatever reason, you had a complete, full body, visceral understanding of that very same quote that you've heard 1,000,000 times. And that's because without you realizing it, you had done the release and reset steps, and you were ready for that reframe psychologically. So when I explain some of the tools that you can use for these steps, you'll understand how you've gained all these new perspectives without necessarily trying or working hard for it, because nature has set us up to be really good at this when we stay connected with ourselves. But in today's world, as you probably have noticed, we are very good at disconnecting with ourselves. So you've actually got a process like this built into your system. And all I'm doing is pointing it out to you so that you can do it more consciously, because you've done it 1,000,000 times in your life unconsciously without realizing what it was you were doing. And there are beliefs that you held, 20 years ago, for example, that seem silly to you now, right? So Santa Claus, I mean, if you don't believe in Santa Claus anymore, for example, or any other mythical figure that doesn't actually exist, because you have a higher perspective now. And so without realizing it, you've actually achieved mindset shifts all your life and perspective shifts. But this is kind of what needs to happen in your brain in order to really allow that shift. And when you can get intentional about it, you can create those shifts as often as you want. So here's what happens if you skip the release step. If you try to go right to the reframe and, don't bother to do any of this groundwork here. If you skip the release and basically it's kind of like putting a spoonful of Nutella on a pile of dog poop. it's still dog poop underneath. The dog poop didn't go away. It's just slightly sweeter smelling dog poop. And so when you skip the release, your problems will actually keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So if you haven't noticed, if you haven't actually released the beliefs that are behind your financial struggles, then those financial struggles will continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger until you change the belief. Because the universe wants you to have all the abundance you want. So it's going to keep giving you these opportunities bigger and bigger and bigger until you have no choice. And until you're basically backed into a corner and have no choice but to shift the belief. But we don't want to wait until you get into dire straits if possible. So if you try to skip the release part of it, your problems are just going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and louder and louder and louder. And if you skip the reset part, this can lead to a lot of stagnation. So it's not that things are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, it's that things just kind of stay stuck. It feels like things aren't moving one way or the other, it's just stagnant. And but the reframe, this is where the magic really happens. The first two steps are necessary, but the third step is where the magic really happens and where a tipping point can really occur. This is the paradigm shift. When you achieve a paradigm shift, you see the world through new eyes. And when your mind has achieved a paradigm shift to that degree, the world around you will appear to change. And it does change, but it's not because of any external force. It's because that was the change that you created within yourself. You changed the film inside the projector, and that was what actually changed the reality that's going on around you. So let's talk about some tools that you can use for each of these steps. So for the release, there are two big tools that I use. Sometimes I use them separately, sometimes I use them together. The first one is an oldie but goodie. You've done it before, hopefully. Crying. A good cry. You ever notice how just you can think more clearly after a big cry, and you notice how problems don't feel quite as big and heavy and impossible after you've had a really good cry? That's because this is a very effective release. And the problem is a lot of us are taught not to cry. We're taught that crying is weakness or it's bad, or that, as women, we're too emotional if we cry or things like that. So crying is the best. So if you can make friends with crying and do it on a regular basis just to get the ickiness out, you will release a lot of baggage. And the other tool that I really like is EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique. This is basically just tapping on the energy meridians in your face and body, and that releases the emotional charge from your body. I often find that tapping causes me to start crying and it just accelerates the release. So doing them together is actually really, really effective. So those are my two favorite tools for releasing. For reset, the two best are either meditation, taking even 5 minutes or even just 1 minute, just taking a few deep breaths and focusing on the breath. That's meditation. And doing that, it brings you back within yourself. And I have this, what I call a zero state meditation that I really love. And I basically just focus on a point within my body until I start to feel a really peaceful sensation taking over my entire mind and body. Sometimes it takes 30 seconds, sometimes it takes a few minutes. Depends on what you were dealing with in the release stage, how long it'll take you to get there. And the other tool that I really love for resetting is a nap or sleep. You know how everything feels easier in the morning. Like even when a problem felt like so huge and impossible and like the end of the world one night, then the next morning, all of a sudden just you can think more clearly. It feels better. That is because you reset. You basically hit the reset button. Reframing. Now, reframing, I'll give you a really cool exercise that you can do with yourself to reframe. I'm a huge fan of asking myself, the version of me who already has the life that she wants. So maybe that's, you know, a really healthy marriage and amazing kids and $1 million business, or traveling constantly, or whatever your dream life looks like. And you might have to get a bit more clear on it if you're not already clear. But from that place, getting into that energy, what would that version of you say about this old belief? And this can be really effective. And you might be like, oh, but I mean, how can I get into that energy? Like, it's still going to be my brain, my current perspective. But no, because you've let go of your old perspective, which gives you access to the most high vibe universal perspectives, the high perspectives that can really see the entire big picture, the big picture perspectives. So that can be a really effective exercise to ask yourself, okay, what would the millionaire version of me think of this belief? Let me take an example so that you see what I mean here. What would the millionaire version of myself think about this old belief that having $1 million business is too much responsibility and I can't handle it? Well, the millionaire version of me might think something like, actually, I just got really good at delegating, or there's nothing that I can't handle, or I learned all the skills that I needed on the way up. I knew that I just trusted myself to handle it. There's a million different reframes that you could go for, but that's a really great way to reach for some higher perspectives. Another way is by hiring a coach. I mean, whether it's me or somebody else, it's irrelevant. As long as it's somebody who resonates with you and you really connect with. But having that outside perspective, somebody who's not so attached to your beliefs and who has worked through a lot of their own beliefs, that can be invaluable to get that reframe at just the right moment that will help take you to that next level, or even several levels away. So that is the 3 steps, the 3 R's, if you will: release, reset, reframe. Commit that to memory, take a screenshot, and remember that you have access to these 3 steps at any given time. All right, so let's hop out of here. All right, so the real secret to going through this paradigm shift hierarchy is remembering to do it. And a lot of us are not in the habit to do it, but you have to be more stubborn about being resilient and about change than you are about staying in your patterns. That's the real key here. So you've sat through this training. We've gotten all the way here because you see the possibilities and you're done accepting a version of your life that you know damn well you deserve better. You're still here because you're ready to shed these limiting beliefs that have been holding you back with money, like yesterday, because you know that it's the key to making more money. There are so many things that you know on a logical level, like you deserve abundance and that money's everywhere and blah, 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 but you can't seem to reach that full body, visceral understanding that translates to actually experiencing it in real life. And you're ready to stop buying into the excuses so that you take the actions that you know damn well would make you a shit ton of money. And it's in using this process that I've taught you, right here in this video, this is what's going to create massive shift. This is going to help, like all of the other M3 modules that you've been experiencing, everything else that you have been looking at, like this is the process that's going to help the rest of it click. And after you've learned this process, I would even recommend going back to some of the other modules, whatever calls your name, whatever feels like it's the logical next step for you. Go back and see what other tidbits you can absorb using this process more intentionally. And this is a process that, like I said, I just kind of downloaded one day and I realized that I've been using this all along. I didn't realize I was using it all along, but I have been. And, sometimes some of the work has been done for me before I get on a call with a client, and that's why the aha moments stick better. But when you use this intentionally, beliefs can shift very fast. People ask me sometimes, like, how long does it take for a belief to shift. And while I can't give you a specific number, I can say that when you do this process of releasing first, resetting, and then reframing, it's going to go a whole lot faster. And if you do need help with the reframing part, like I said, I highly encourage working with a coach, even if it's not me, but having somebody else who's not kind of stuck in the middle of your perceived problem or your problem, to bounce this stuff off of and to get their perspective and to see, to reach for that perspective of source. Because that's ultimately what we're reaching for, right? We all want alignment because we know that alignment leads to so many amazing manifestations, and plus it just feels good, right? So if you're struggling to reach for that perspective of source all on your own, then reach out to a coach that really resonates with you, or a biz bestie, or somebody who is capable of helping you find that perspective. And if that person is me, then by all means, reach out to me. Send me an email at chelsea@leftbrainhippie.com, and we can chat and see what a good next step would be for you if you want to work together. And if not, I highly encourage you find somebody, regardless if it's me or not. So anyway, thank you so much for hanging out with me for this training. Use this in your life. And actually, before I completely end this training, one last note that I want to say in order to kind of allow this to flow, because it's good to know how to use this process intentionally, but it's also good to just know that when you are, when you're in the dumps and you're feeling like crap and you want to have a good cry or something like that, it's good to know what those next steps are. Okay. So if you've had a really bad day or something like that, or something happened that you don't want to carry around with you. And actually, let me illustrate how I used this recently. I'm looking at my clock right now, and my computer is 44% charged, and it's 11:11 a.m. I love it. So there was one morning when I dropped my son off to school earlier than usual. And I was under the impression that from 7:30, there was playground supervision. And as it turns out, that was not the case. But I dropped him off, and he went behind the school. And I was sitting there, and I couldn't pull away. My daughter's in the back seat saying, like, "Mommy, can we go now?" And I was just like, I couldn't drive away. And so anyway, I went back, and I realized there was nobody. Not only was there no supervision, but my son was not there. And I just saw his backpack sitting beside the school. So I started yelling his name, and the teacher came out, and, there was a teacher inside who noticed him outside and brought him in. And anyway, so I talked to her for a moment and just made sure that he was okay to be in there before I left and all that. But when I got back out to my van, I felt like the worst mother in the world. I felt like the worst human being. I was just like, oh my God, I almost just dropped my kid off and drove away without even like checking to make sure that there was an adult around. He's 6 years old. Anything could have happened, even though we live in a pretty safe place. Like, you just never know. And I dropped off my daughter, and then I was just so upset. And that was a really good time for me to put this into practice. And that's what I did. So I had a long drive ahead of me that day, over an hour. So I started tapping and crying in the car. Any car who was driving by me probably was just like, what is this bitch doing? But I was sobbing, and I was tapping, and I was getting it all out. I was calling my feelings exactly what they were. I wasn't trying to sugarcoat them. And I was, sobbing about what a horrible mother I am and all of this, and like really just going to town. And once the emotional charge had kind of subsided and it went down to, like a 2, and I didn't feel like such a horrible person, or I certainly didn't feel it strongly. It was just kind of, okay, I can say the words. They don't have that same emotional charge anymore. That was when I just kind of started doing some breathing and just driving, looking at the scenery, resetting. And I took that time to just say, okay, you know what? Let me just breathe for a little while. And I did that for a few minutes. And what I found was that naturally, the perspective of the universe, of source, started to kind of come naturally to me. I didn't really have to look for it. And this, you might find that this happens to you. And, you know, you don't actually have to go searching for it or journaling about it or anything. But sometimes when you allow this process to unfold organically, it just comes to you. And in that reframe process, I was able to see that, no, actually, like, I'm a really good mom because I listened to my intuition, and I did go back to double check. I didn't just drive off without making sure, like, all the reframes started coming in, and I immediately felt so much better. And I felt so supported by the universe. And I felt so at peace with the situation. And I was able to let it go. And it wasn't something that I ended up carrying around with me for the rest of the day. So it's really important to understand this process, and also understand that, you know, our body does have these ways of kind of allowing the process to unfold organically. So there have been many times when you've done this in your life without realizing it, but when you know how to do it more intentionally, that's where you really unlock a lot of power. So anytime something really bad happens or something really upsetting, use this process to let it go so that you're not carrying it with you. And you can use this for old stuff that you're carrying around too. You can use it in the moment. You can use it for stuff that happened in the past that you're still carrying, however you want. So I hope that this has helped you immensely, and I'd say have fun with this, but usually when you're doing this, it's not exactly a super fun moment, but you know what I mean. So thanks for hanging out with me. Make sure you download the visualization and the meditation that goes along with this training, and I will see you next month. Bye-bye.